Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration. It's your indie spotlight for the week of December 30th, 2024. Happy Halloween, everybody. Apologies, this is coming out a little late. I had some family obligations that prevented us from recording it on Tuesday like we usually do. But it is a fifth Wednesday of the month, so it is a bit of a smaller week anyway. Same thing with our DC review that's over on Rocky's channel, Comic Space Boom exclamation point. Make sure you head over there and subscribe. Check out our thoughts on the DC books for the week. But even though it's a smaller week, I thought there was still plenty of good independent titles out this week. Rocky, what'd you think?
Yeah. There always is. There's so damn many all the time, and it's hard. We certainly try to peruse as many as we can. But yeah, it was a good week this week. It was. Yeah. I will say though that in choosing, you and I had similar choices in what we wanted to review, but we got a good eclectic array of choices this week for your listeners.
Yeah, 100%. So be sure you're subscribing, everybody. If not, head over to YouTube to search for the Comic Source. Once you're there, you know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe. Leave some comments below. Let us know what you thought of the independent books this week. Like I said, Rocky's channel, Comic Space Boom exclamation point, over on YouTube as well, where our DC Spotlight comes out every week. And of course, if you want to go back and listen to the literally thousands of episodes available on the Comic Source podcast feed, or new episodes moving forward, maybe it's just easier for you to listen in the car or the subway if it's audio only. Just go to whatever platform or app you use to listen to your podcast, to search for the Comic Source and subscribe. So with that all out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into the first book we're going to talk about today. Now, I really wanted to check this out, and I just didn't get a chance to, partly because it's a whole graphic novel. It's a whole story all released. Like, maybe, I don't even know how many, probably 3 or 4 issues worth of story based on the number of pages here. It's from a newer publisher called Magma. It's called Silicon Bandits. It's written by, let me find the creative team here, Jason Starr. Dalibor Talajic handles the art. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit if I can get the colorist. Stephen Bartalik, looks like, handles the colors. From what I can see, the art looks really, really good. And like I said, it looked like a great story. Sean Lee's on the letters. So Rocky did get a chance to read this, so we're going to talk about it a little bit. And I'm hoping myself to get a chance to read it because it's this story set in the future. There's heists going on. I'm always a sucker for a good heist story. And like I said, I wanted a chance to read it, but I just didn't have time. So anyway, take it away, Rocky. What did you think of this Silicon Bandits from Magma?
Well, it's one of those stories where on the surface it sounds like, well, it might sound a little bit tropey, and you might think it's that you could predict the plotting, but I don't think most can. It takes place in the future, the year 2089. The planet is ruled by well, not ruled, but there's 4 trillionaires on the planet. So just think of in the sense that imagine there's 4 Elon Musks, or there's one, there's a Bill Gates, there's an Elon Musk, but they go by different names. And there's these very powerful artificial intelligence companies, and it's a race to basically to advance artificial intelligence. And the 2 central characters in the story, their names are Kenji Sato and Aurora Withers. Kenji and Aurora, and they're a family. They're a husband and wife team, and they're a couple anyway. And they're actually Kenji in particular is really good at developing artificial intelligence, and he basically creates something that's brand new, and this new C47 model. I mean, imagine the 2000th version of the iPhone might be an actual Android in our time. Well, he basically creates like the perfect android. And unfortunately, Kenji and Aurora, after they invent this artificial intelligence, make this super incredible, human looking, indistinguishable from humans, passes all the tests that, and can just do amazing things. And the moment they create this new technology, they're fired from their company. And so they basically the 4 issues it's 4 issues. It's all in it's one full story, and they're pissed off, and they basically all their tech is proprietarily owned by the company they work for, but they managed to sneak out one of their artificial intelligent, one of their, they basically sneak out an entire family of artificial intelligence uh, humans that they've created, and it's an AI family that they've created, and it's a super incredibly smart family. Imagine a family that is perfect soldier, perfect super intelligence, everything, and also has all the and also is follows orders, truthful, they're moral, et cetera, et cetera. And and while they have independent intelligence, their own intelligence, they're basically controlled to they're basically inclined generally to do good. Well, Kenjo and Aurora want to they want to, now that they have these constructs, they want to create a heist. And the heist is essentially to steal a particular metal that you need to create more of these AI constructs. And and they utilize their own creations to try to pull off this heist. Unfortunately for them, something goes wrong, and there's a number of betrayals. And of course, and I'm not giving too much away. I'm not giving away much when I say that the AIs begin to think for themselves and impose their own kind of thinking onto the matter, and not necessarily in a bad way. But they have their artificial intelligence, and they tend to think for themselves, and maybe they don't like being used by anybody. And all the different, you get to know the characters of all the characters, the human characters and the AI characters, and it's very humanizing, and it's very easy to imagine. It's 2089 in the future this takes place. It's very easy to imagine that taking place in the real world. Just a couple of generations from now, perhaps even sooner, could something like this, an adventure similar to this, happen in our world? I think it's quite possible. And it's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the ending, I think, is very appropriate. It ends on somewhat of it's not a cliffhanger. It ends the way you would expect it to end, with one, well, I won't say the ending other than to say that I think it's a good ending for this type of thing, because it's thought-provoking. It makes you reflect on technology. It makes you reflect on our relationship with technology. And the art is fantastic. I quite enjoyed it. I think the emotions as expressed between the characters goes over very well. The communication and some of the dialogue between Kenji and Aurora and the AI family that they create, I mean, it's really indistinguishable from any other type of communication. And that's sort of what makes it kind of a little bit creepy at times and eerie, but at the same time, it definitely has something to say. And writer Jason Starr does a really good job here. I was surprised. I actually thought this was going to be an ongoing series when I started collecting it. I was a little disappointed that it ended at issue 4, but it does end in a way that I think is satisfying, because it poses the questions, but it poses the type of questions that it's not realistic for us to expect all the answers. It invites the reader to sort of bring your own answers and your own philosophies and views of AI into the equation, which I think all the best stories do. So it gets my high recommendation.
So I'm curious, what's their reasoning for wanting to steal them? Okay, so they steal metal, and people won't be able to make any more AI. Are they just mad that they got fired, or they think that they shouldn't be creating any more AI constructs?
That's a good question, and I'm not. I don't want to give it away, but
Okay,
let's
fair.
just say that.
Yeah, that's
Well,
fair.
I will just hint and quickly say that if they own substantially most of the material used to create the AIs are so intelligent, and they're so intelligent they can get leaps and bounds ahead of everyone, and that's almost it's a danger to own these AI, because you'll never find anything more perfect than these AI, because they're exponentially above even the lower models of super soldiers. And so again, the moral disposition of the AI is very, very important, and how they're used and utilized is extremely important. And Kenji and Aurora have at least a stronger moral compass than the company that they're fired from does. And so and it's so related to the materials that they want to steal is kind of important. But there's also a financial interest, and there's some greed involved in the part of Kenji Sato, which plays a role in maybe coming back to haunt him because of the betrayals that happen in the story. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it looks like a pretty dense read too. A lot of I don't know
Yeah,
if maybe it's because
yeah.
we're looking at 4 pages at a time, but yeah, it looks like a lot of dialogue. So,
Yeah.
all right, yeah, definitely gonna have to make some time to go back and check that out. So, all right, first book that I am going to talk about, and this is a book that I've been wanting to read for a really long time, and at some point we're gonna have the creator on to talk about it in detail. But it's called Kaya. Right there on the top, it's listed as fantasy adventure. It's from Wes Craig, and you're like, well, how come that sounds familiar? So Wes Craig is the one that was on the show that we interviewed, or that I interviewed to talk about the DC All-In special, because he's the one that did the dark side side of the story, the Omega side, if you will. So not only is he handling the art here, but he's also doing the story. He's doing the design. Jason Wordie handles the colors. And then Tom Napolitano is on letters. So, and it's an interesting story. It's about this young girl named Kaya. She lives in sort of a post-apocalyptic world where robots have taken over. Robots are the enemy, and her and her brother are trying to survive. And she's sort of prophesied as perhaps being a savior, or perhaps it's her brother who's the savior. And they don't know who to trust. And in this particular story, there's this idea of a haunted city that she's having dreams about. She's been separated from her brother. She's trying to figure out what's going on. And you can see how different it looks from the first couple pages here, where she's dreaming. She's sort of having these visions. Her uncle is showing up there, who's sort of a mentor to her to give her advice. And then later, when she actually wakes up and she's actually reunited with her brother, the art looks significantly different. But if you'll notice, this is one of those comics, and again, with Wes Craig being the artist himself, this is one of those comics where a lot of the storytelling is visual storytelling. I mean, you've got a fantastic page right here with a couple of robots on the top. They're clearly seeking out Kaya. She's a human. Robots are sort of human killers, if you will. She sees them coming. You see the way she kind of braces herself and then takes off running. Like, you can feel the desperation. You can feel sort of the inevitability of the robots. There's a lot to be said for the amount of storytelling in this page, even though it's only 5 panels and there's no dialogue at all. So it shows, one of the things I love about Kaya is it's one of those comics that shows the ability to tell a sequential story with very little dialogue. Not to say that there's never dialogue. You can see as she's running here, she actually, again, is reunited with her brother. There's this other character, again, talked about Trail before, or betrayal, and she's wondering if she can trust him. And it's all leading up to them basically not necessarily fulfilling the vision that Kaya had, but this idea of this haunted city that you can see here. And I can't display it properly because, again, a lot of these times these press previews, it's a double-page spread. I got to show it separate here, but you can see this ghost city that she's been dreaming about. It's been a, kind of a vision that she's seen, and the worries that perhaps it's out of the frying pan into the fire, if you will. So again, Kaya, the strength of it is the visual storytelling. I would also say it's very much all ages. You can enjoy it as an older comic reader, but it's something that you can also share with younger readers, people you're trying to get interested in reading, or kids are trying to get interested in comics. This is the kind of comic that can that draw them in. The art, I don't want to say the art is simple, but the art is sort of very appealing. The backgrounds tend to be relatively light throughout the series, which really brings Kaya and her brother and the other antagonist to the fore, and again, just shows the strength of the storytelling. I mean, you can see as I'm flipping through here, this digital copy, there's very little dialogue.
Can I ask a question? Does Kaya have a magic arm? Is that true? A magic arm?
It's like, yeah, it's like robotic. Again, robots.
How old is she?
Yeah,
How old is Kaya?
No, I'm not. I don't remember off the top of my head. I don't know if it ever says, and I'm not remembering. But
Would
like
you say this is for younger readers?
I always get the sense like 10 to 12
Mm.
ish. You know, maybe a little older and just kind of small for her age. Brother probably like 5 to 7.
Yeah.
Um, but
So is this all ages? Would this be an all ages comic, or is this a more
yeah, I
adult?
mean, yes and no. I mean, I think it is. I think it would appeal to younger, but the other part of the thing of appealing to younger readers is it is very what's the word? I mean, it's dystopian, but it's not necessarily depressing. I mean, Kaya is very heroic, and those themes are sort of universal, but it can be a little morose. I think would probably be the word that I would use at times. But yeah, I think there's kind of a throughput of hopefulness, but it does lean into some scientific tropes, Um, and the other thing that I love, like you see it right here on the cover. The cover, in a way, is sort of like a preview of the story. Like you and I, we talk all the time about, don't like that comic covers don't show a scene from the book like they used to back in the day, word balloons, what have you. I mean, you see it right here. Surrounded by the robot empire, Kaya and Jin are forced to retreat into a haunted city. Jin being her brother. So you sort of get like a little blurb about what it's about, like right there. As well as the title page always reminds us, Kaya raised as a hunter warrior, half brother Jin was raised to be a prince, and that's the idea of him being the savior, being the golden one. But sometimes I get the feeling that maybe it's Kaya that's actually the one that's going to save the world. She's the one that's going to destroy the robot empire. So yeah, it's very much like think about like Dark Crystal or Labyrinth, those type of sort of fantasy stories that have very young characters as the heroes, and you can't help root for them. But yeah, they're in a bad spot for sure as this one starts. So I recommend it. I think it's something that you asked if it's all ages. I think it is all ages in terms of if you're an older reader, you can read it and enjoy it. There's the art's fantastic, and there's a lot for you to discover. And if you want to share it with a younger reader, you can. If they have any questions about it, then you can kind of be there to fill in the gaps. That's not to say a younger reader couldn't pick this up and read it on their own, but I don't think they're gonna grasp as much of the nuance of the story, which again is perfectly fine. They can follow the story as it's going along because again, there's not a lot of words, there's not a lot of dialogue. But I think some of the bigger concepts might go over their head, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
but
sure.
But that's not going to lessen their enjoyment of it, because there is a sense, and again, I look forward to having Wes Craig on the show to talk about this. There is a sense of sort of losing ourselves in technology, which is certainly an interesting metaphor for the modern world. Like it's easier than ever to connect with people. I mean, case in point, you live in Canada. We've been doing this. We did this podcast for over 2 years before we met in person for the first time. That's really cool. Technology can do really cool things, but at the same time, it can also isolate us, right? Like people are less likely to travel and do other things. I'll just jump on a Zoom call. So there's a little bit of that. Obviously, that's going to, like I said, go over the head of younger readers. But there's a lot of value, I think, in the story. And yeah, just Wes Craig will be on at some point to talk about it. We'll dive into that. But it is a book that I think it's been nominated for awards, and deservingly so. And it's been around for a while. And it's only on issue 22. I think it's been coming out for a couple of years. Because again, Wes Craig is writing and drawing it, so he takes his time and he wants to make sure to do it right and what have you. So wouldn't be that hard to get caught up in trade. I'll say that.
Yeah.
All right. Up next we have Redcoat. This is from Ghost Machine, written by Jeff Johns. Art is by Brian Hitch. Got colors by Brad Anderson. Letters by Rob Lee. Fantastic main cover there. Might be kind of hard to get in a 9.8 when you do these black covers. But at the same time, the cover quality and the paper quality on these is a lot higher than the old school books used to be, so maybe it wouldn't be as hard. But yeah, this was on your list, Rocky. I'll let you kick it off. Give us your thoughts on Redcoat number 7.
Well, one of the things about what Jeff Johns does very wisely here is this. I described this to you earlier when we were talking briefly the other day about. I consider this issue to be like a wonderful sigh. It's like a collective to take your collective breath. We the first six issue, the opening story arc, those six issues, we saw Simon Pierre basically almost die. He almost lost his immortality. We found out who the true villain is, who's the grand architect, revealed to be Benedict Arnold himself. And here, and of course, those first six issues, it was Simon Pure teaming up with a very young Albert Einstein. And then this issue 7 takes place in 1955, and which is the year that this is, there's spoilers here, but, Albert Einstein, I knew he dies in 1955. And I know I actually read a biography recently on Albert Einstein, so I knew I just knew that when I saw that this issue starts off with Simon Pure, it looks like he's in Boston, but I was guessing it was the 1940s, and he's on his way, and he meets a very older Albert Einstein in bed in his what ends up being his deathbed, and it's a conversation between Simon Pure and Albert Einstein. But where this issue really shines for me is where, I mean, the dialogue is great. We'll talk about that in a moment, but just how Simon Pure himself, one of the things that Jeff Johns has been so good at conveying is Simon Pure is kind of he's kind of a jerk. He's not somebody you'd necessarily think of, oh yeah, Simon Pierre, that guy's going to be a hero one day. It's not like that at all. He's always a guy. He's got his own morals. He has his own way of doing things. And why was he chosen to be immortal? And here the issue starts off with him actually shaving. It's the first time I think we see Simon Pure shaved. He's dressing himself up. It's 1955, so and yet it's odd. Why would somebody in the 1950s put on his old uniform, his Redcoat, so to speak? Well, he's doing that because he's going to go see Albert Einstein, his old friend, for what you can assume he knows is going to be the last time. And the moments there, as he's putting on his clothes, he's taking his time. You can tell he wants to look good. It's almost as if he really does want to look good and show well for his old friend. And before there's a really kind of interesting moment before he even gets to the hospital where he sees Albert Einstein, where he actually goes to a bar and he orders a drink and he doesn't even drink it. And it was almost as if he was contemplating. It's almost as if he wanted to get drunk because he woke up that morning surrounded by empty beer bottles and whiskey bottles, and it was almost as if he wanted to get drunk again, but he decided not to. He goes back into the taxi and he goes and he visits and has one last conversation to his old friend. I thought it was beautifully well done, and that's before we even get to the conversation between Albert Einstein and Simon Pure, and they talk about and they reflect on their life. And Simon Pure is pretty hard on himself. He reflects on his own accomplishments, or what he's very much feeling down on himself, his own perceived failures. And Albert Einstein, of course, has a very different outlook on life, and that really shines through as well. And it's funny how Simon Pure at one time was the adult in the room, and a young Albert Einstein was obviously the younger person. Now it's the opposite. It's Albert Einstein who's basically dropping some truth bombs here and giving some pretty sage advice to an immortal Simon Pure. And the dialogue works really well. And I encourage people to pick it up just to enjoy that aspect of it, but also to enjoy the art. A perfect collaboration, surprise, surprise, between the art and the writing of Jeff Johns. There's so many pages where the art does all the talking for you, and yet there's also the pages where the dialogue really tugs at the heartstrings too. You put the two together. This was a really great issue. It's actually my favorite issue so far. And I know we haven't reviewed every single issue, but this is a series that continues to top itself, and I really enjoyed this issue. I thought it was extremely well done and a much needed respite where we can sit back and enjoy these two very interesting characters with hints that perhaps we haven't seen the last of Albert Einstein, or at least one. We're going to see more of him, although in a different time period in future issues. So I quite enjoyed this. What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't at all what I was expecting, right? Like the word that I kept coming back to time and time and time again whenever I was reviewing Redcoat or talking about an issue of Redcoat, it was always adventure, right? Like just this huge sense of adventure, almost like maybe we could say an immortal Indiana Jones, if you will. And this is not that. This is just so different from what we've seen from this series before, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It's really enjoyable for what it is. It shows the camaraderie and kind of the fellowship, the friendship that these two developed over time. Yeah, I mean it's really heartfelt. The other part of this that's so interesting to me, and I talked to Brian Hitch a little bit about this when I was at New York Comic Con, was the idea that Jeff Johns, grew up in America. He's an American. Brian Hitch, from the UK. So this is very obviously Albert Einstein, immigrated and eventually became a U.S. citizen. But Simon Pure, he has a bit of a different outlook, being a redcoat. And you and I, we talked about it on the show when I think we talked about it on the show when we reviewed the 6th issue, and it was revealed that Benedict Arnold was the grand architect, like you said. And yourself being from Canada, and you didn't have the sense that I had of. I sort of felt like the book was, in a way, was disrespectful of George Washington, which like maybe that's okay because we know George Washington owned slaves and he did a lot of things that, looking back now, we go, yeah, that's not good. That's not something to aspire to. Yet, we think of him as a founding father, first president, very heroic, and it's sort of, as an American, it's ingrained into you that you should have like the utmost respect for George Washington and what have you. But that's not Brian Hitch. Brian Hitch didn't grow up here. He's got a very again, a very different perspective. So I say that to say this, that the book, while it's had this huge sense of adventure the entire time, there's also been this subtext of politics in a way, and the fact that these historical people or historical figures are real people, and people aren't perfect. Humans aren't perfect. They're make mistakes and have their foibles and what have you, and that is sort of emphasized, I guess, if you will, like the mortality of humans, the fallibility of humans, the fact that with the exception of very few, in this case Simon Pure for Redcoat, your time is limited, and that's sort of the conversation that Albert Einstein and Simon Pure are having, which is sort of a metaphor for the entire story. If you get beyond that adventure that we've had, again, really fun, super fun adventure that we've had, that's made the book very enjoyable. But let's take a step beyond that and see, why does Simon Pure, as much as, like you said, he's kind of a jerk, he's kind of arrogant, certainly loves his meals and, loves his food, loves his drink, which makes it even more poignant that he, stops for the drink because he, wants the liquid courage to go and see Albert, because they haven't seen each other for a long time, and he knows this is probably the last time he's going to see him. But then that scene with him leaving without even having taken a drink of the beer, as sort of a metaphor for who Simon Pure is. Because again, if you get along the adventure, why is he doing it? Like, the guy's immortal. Yes, he's hungry all the time. Yes, he loves his food. He loves his drink. But he's still out there, fighting the good fight, if you will. And he could find a way to not do that. Like, I get that he operates and as a hitman sort of, and he's not always asking questions or what have you. But when push comes to shove, at least as we saw in the first arc, he was out there doing. He was out there trying to save America and keep the United States from literally burning down. And so, despite this sort of self-deprecating attitude that he has, and this idea that he's a scoundrel or a scad or what have you, he is, he's not 100% pure, like his name would indicate, Simon Pure, right? And he's like, that's his thing. I'm anything but. That's what he likes to say. He's very fond of saying. But there's value. There's a lot of value there. And has that value grown over time? Well, to hear Albert Einstein say it, yes, he has. And again, I think it's great writing. It's great storytelling from Brian Hitch and Jeff Johns, and it's great writing from Jeff Johns with Albert Einstein saying, something as I get older, it really hits home for me. You hear it all the time from people that are older and they've had more life experience. Like, man, if I only knew then what I know now. Like, I wish I could go back, and not that I wouldn't want to relive high school and college, but I wish, like, the knowledge and the life experience that I have now, I wish I had that, back when I had my youth. You think about the mistakes you made, and you just feel like you could accomplish more. You could be a better person. And that's Albert Einstein's point here to Simon Pure. Like, by the time most people figure out how to be a better person, it's almost too late, because you're sort of closer to the end than you are to the beginning. And it's hard to change and make a difference in the world. But Simon Pure is unique in that that's not the case for him. He's got more than one lifetime to live, so he can make a difference. He can learn. He can keep becoming a better person despite his own, again, self-deprecating opinion. Fantastic storytelling, really great issue, great art. This is the last thing I expected from Redcoat. It's been just such a wild, adventuresome ride, like the entire time. And this was just a really heartfelt, poignant issue. You see Albert Einstein there in his last moments. You see Simon Pure actually shedding a tear, and then we get this fantastic page from Brian Hitch that kind of shows that this is not the first time that Simon Pure has experienced loss. We see it 1782, again in 1845, again in 1909, and then finally 1955, where he's lost somebody else that he cares about. That is the curse of immortality, and it's not new. It's not like this is the first time it's been explored. I mean, you can go watch like the first Highlander movie, for example, and see the same thing. It is sort of the curse, of living forever, is that you're going to outlive the people that you care about. So again, a very poignant issue. It was definitely unexpected. This is not what I was expecting from the latest issue of Redcoat, but just expertly done, and really showing the ability for Ghost Machine that man, I don't want to say they can do no wrong, but I mean their books are just really, really good. They're just really, really good, and there's a reason that they sell out constantly. And on that note, the next book I'm going to talk about is called It Happened on Hyde Street, Devour. It's as far as I know, it's the first comic book work for Maytal. I'm going to mispronounce her last name, Zechut, I think, Zchut. I've been trying to get her on the show to talk about it. But yeah, the news came down today that this has sold out. So if it is indeed her first work, or their first work in comics, yeah, I mean, fantastic. Congratulations. It's amazing to sell out the first thing that you ever wrote. So it's got art by Layla Louise. She's also, or Leiz, Leiz. She's credited as co-creator. Alex Sinclair handles the colors. Rob Lee's on letters. Obviously, it's a bit of a Hyde Street story, so it ties into Hyde Street. It's very much horror and that sort of thing. And we've seen the store that's featured in this issue. We've seen it on Hyde Street before in the sampler. So yeah, this idea of the Devour diet plan. And this is set back in 1983, sort of the height of the fitness boom, Jane Fonda workout, and that sort of thing. And you see this woman, and she's drinking diet soda, and she's eating donuts, and she's a little bit overweight, and she's very much aware of her circumstance, if you will. Her husband has passed away. You see the fat-free store there. She goes in on kind of a whim, and she's talking to the proprietor, and the proprietor you know, like why would you go into a store called Fat Free unless you know wanted to lose weight or what have you? So she's got diet magazines. She's got all these different diet products, and through the conversation, becomes clear that this blonde woman would like to lose weight. Maybe she just doesn't have the willpower, or you know, the loss of her husband. I mean, there's any number of reasons why she could be, you know, not exercising or eating right, and that sort of thing. And so this woman, Mrs. Goodbody, rather, gives her this product called Devour, and says, yeah, you know, take it home, and check it out. You know, it can help you lose weight. And she talks to her daughter. Her daughter's about to sneak some cookies, and she kind of scolds her daughter. You know, you don't want to end up fat like me. And I don't think she's like. That's the thing I want to stress, right? It's not like she's hugely obese. This blonde woman, you know, she obviously has body image issues, which, you know, a lot of people do. I get that, and this story is very relatable in that way. But this idea of, you know, food as the enemy, and it's just not a healthy way to think about it. And again, going back to 1983, things were a little bit different back then. I think we have a little better understanding of health and nutrition now, just generally as a populace. But yeah, she's scolding her daughter, saying, "Yeah, I don't want you to be big like me, what have you." She's saying, you know, I miss Daddy and that sort of thing. And later, this woman, she's laying on the couch. She's drinking Slim Fast. They call it Slim Fit, but, you know, basically a diet shake. And watching others work out rather than, you know, getting off her butt and working out herself. And so then she goes and opens the jar, and, you know, something horrific inside, I guess, you know, based on the look on her face. But we're not sure exactly what it is. So then we jump to today, right? So now we're talking, what, another 41 years later, if you will, and there's her daughter. Her daughter's trying to fit into a wedding dress. Again, I want to stress the fact that her daughter, this woman here that we saw, there was a little girl there a little while ago. Or actually, I'm sorry, this is not the girl. This is the granddaughter. This is the granddaughter of the blonde woman that we just saw. But she is in no way obese. She looks fine. She looks normal. She looks like a normal person, but she can't fit into this particular wedding dress. Guess what? Get a bigger size. You know, you're not hideous or anything like that. But there we see the mother and daughter. So this is the daughter that was trying to sneak the cookies on the left, and this is the mother that was obese then. And they are so thin to look grotesque in my mind. Like, you know, if I was a single guy, I'd much rather be going out with the girl that can't quite fit in that wedding dress than one of these women that look like, all I want to do is feed them a hamburger because they're like emaciated. And you can see them there. So you see them on the couch in the middle there, and then you see right below that, you see the flashback to the scene with the cookies. So you can see it's the daughter, it's the who was now the grandmother of the woman in the dress. And so the story goes on, and this woman is struggling. She goes on a diet. She's trying to watch what she eats. She's exercising. You can see running on a treadmill. She's keeping a journal, and she's talking about, you know, trying to lose weight. They throw a bridal shower for her, and she eats a little bit, and then, you know, feels super guilty about it. We see another member of her family, you know, chowing down there that's also like super emaciated. You wonder, like, how can they eat like that and stay so thin? Like, what exactly is going on? And throughout, as this woman who's trying to lose weight and fit into this wedding dress, the stress of it, like the body image stuff, and, you know, feeling bad about herself. And again, I go back, like, just get a bigger size. It's not the end of the world. And meanwhile, the mother and the bride's mother and the grandmother, the blonde woman we first saw first, their attitude towards food is not healthy. The grandmother is more admonishing even of the granddaughter, saying, you know, we just need to get her on the diet that we're on. She's not going to be able to do it on her own. The mother's trying to have belief in her daughter that she can do it on her own without having to take whatever this Devour diet thing is or what have you. But what's interesting is, you know, during the story here, we see them several times just picking out, like, look at all that food. You're like, wait a second, how can they be so thin to where, I mean, you can see her breastbone there. She's chowing down on like a whole ham. Like, it's just crazy. And again, similar to the behavior we saw of the other woman in the family that was chowing down at the bridal shower. So you wonder, you know, what the heck's going on? The woman goes in, the bride-to-be goes in for another fitting. She hasn't lost the weight. Grandmother there's saying, yeah, it's going to be a miracle. I know somebody that might be able to help. But yeah, just how, stickly and sickly she looks, it's awful. So she takes the granddaughter to Devour, to the fat-free shop, and there's Miss Goodbody, who looks like she hasn't aged a day, still very much wearing the 80s fashion with the headband and the zip-up jacket and whatever, and they get her on the Devour diet. And sure enough, on her wedding day here, actually before that happens, we find out that the daughter is, or the bride to be, she's a teacher for like kindergarten or preschool, or very young children, and she's actually eating a cupcake of one of the kids that's having a birthday. Again, just a normal thing that shouldn't necessarily be admonished for, when that woman that was pigging out at her bridal shower, that's super skinny, another member of the family, shows up and says, "Don't trust her, don't trust your grandmother," and basically she dies. It's horrible. She like falls over and dies. It looks like you would think, based on her looks, that she dies of starvation or some kind of other eating disorder, and it's horrible. And she ends up passing away. And at that point, the mother says, "Yeah, it doesn't look like you're going to be able to do it on your own. The stress of losing your aunt, and wedding coming up, and yeah, so we'll go ahead and get you on this diet." So yeah, they go ahead and get her on the Devour diet, and we see here on this page what the Devour diet is. We see what's in the Devour jar. It's basically these parasites. So they can eat as much as they want. These women can eat as much as they want, and they're not going to gain any weight, because it's actually the parasites that are being fed the food. The parasites are feeding on them, and that's why they have to eat copious amounts of food, but they still look like they're starved to death, because it's the parasites that are sucking up all the nutrients. So it's awful. It's horrific. It's very much a metaphor for I don't want to say the fitness industry, but kind of body image issues and body dysmorphia and what have you. It's claimed the lives of hundreds, thousands of people. Karen Carpenter's was somebody that comes to mind. Super talented, very thin, but I always thought she was overweight, and it's just a horrible thing. So she does fit into her wedding dress. I don't think she looks particularly good. She looked way better before. So give a lot of credit to Layla Leyes for doing a good job with the art of showing this woman, who I think looked way better before, looked healthier before. I mean, the dress is kind of draped on her now. Her arms are like little sticks. And this idea that it's perpetuating, right? Like the mother passed this idea of having to be thin, and this idea of having the parasite living within you, onto her daughter. Now her daughter's passed it, her grandmother's passed it on to her daughter, and we see kind of that perpetuation here, that the daughter has a daughter. The bride that we saw get married has a daughter, and you worry that it's going to be passed on to her. And she even says, you don't have to worry about dealing with the pressure of being thin. You don't have to. You have nothing to worry about. You don't have to worry about your grandmother. You don't have to worry about your great grandmother. You never have to deal with that pressure. I'll fix it for you. So it's like she's already from the start, from the crib, gonna put a parasite in her daughter. Like, just awful, just awful. So this is a very disturbing story on a lot of levels. Like, first of all, the idea of a parasite living, within you think alien, what have you. It's scary and horrific, but more than that, like this story bothered me. It bothered me because I know people that struggle with their weight and worry constantly that how they're perceived and it's I think it's worse when you're younger. Like how ruthless kids can be with bullying and teasing and what have you. Calling people fat and that sort of thing. And it's not okay. It's not okay. And I know a lot of people deal with this. It's a story that's going to be relatable, especially for women, unfortunately. I think they get more of this. It's kind of disproportionate that they're expected to be thin and, beautiful and, attract a husband and what have you. And it goes back to, earlier times of society and gender roles and that sort of thing. So really great story here in terms of why it's scary. Why is this a horror story? Well, it's a horror story because they have monsters living inside them. That's like the surface level, right? Then you have the deeper level of actually why this is scary because it's so realistic, or maybe too realistic, in the idea of sort of unhealthy ways of self-image, and not even self-image, but also societal, like the way society sees you, and what your value is, and what it says to you. Oh, if you're overweight, it means you don't have any willpower. It means you're weak. It means you're lesser. And you don't always know people's circumstances, so you shouldn't judge. Don't judge a book by its cover. You don't know you haven't walked a mile in the other person's shoes, so you shouldn't necessarily be judging. And so yeah, I think it's really quality work here by Maytal. I'm really curious to see what else they can do, whether it be in horror or other genre. Yeah, I was just really, really impressed with this. And again, it's sold out. Second printing's coming. If your comic shop didn't get a copy, apologize for that. That's why you got to pre-order. But there will be another printing coming. So, what did you think of it, Rocky? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I for slightly different reasons, but a little bit related. I mean, body dysmorphia is something that nowadays is, I think, more, back in the 80s, it was anorexia nervosa, and women were so, going to extreme lengths to lose weight. But nowadays, I find that body dysmorphia is around for both men and women. Everybody wants to look good. Everybody wants to look better. And even right now, this is a story that plays on everyone's worst fears. Like, take, for example, Ozempic. Ozempic right now, a lot of people are embarrassed to admit they're using Ozempic to lose weight, even though it's got, it's arguably has some minimal side effects, or maybe too much, but I mean, people are so afraid to, they're afraid of being stigmatized for trying to lose weight or failing, or maybe, God forbid, they got to take a drug to help them lose weight. And there's a stigma associated with it, and there's a fear associated with it, because everyone wants to do their best, because not everyone can, everyone's different. Not everyone can work out to be effective, and everyone has different eating habits, and there's all kinds of YouTube influencers out there telling you how to lose weight, and they're all right and they're all wrong, and who the hell do you believe? Fake news, et cetera, et cetera. It's playing on our fears, and along comes this story called Devour. And I love the idea in the story of the parasites, because I think the parasites are like almost like a metaphor for our own parasitic way of thinking, that we get trapped in a way of thinking about ourselves, our body dysmorphia, and thinking that we're not good enough, and that we're not pretty enough, or handsome enough, or built enough, and it just plays on all that to such great effect. And then at the end, to have that influence that we're poisoning our own children with our parasitic way of thinking. I think it's a very effective opening story.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. It's awful, right? And to take the metaphor even a step further, it's like we're feeding these parasitic thoughts by kind of the way we live our lives and what we're buying into, and you end up wasting away, and you're not left with much because you've bought into it so much, you've fed into it. So really effective story, and again, for a relatively early effort, as I said, I think it's first effort for Maytal. Really impressed with what they were able to do. So okay, next up we have Knights versus Samurai, issue number 2. This is from Image Comics. It's from a story by David Dasmalchian, who played the Polka Dot Man, I think, in the Suicide Squad movie. Fede Mele handles the art, Ulysses Areola on colors, and then Underworld Design handles the letters. What do you think of this?
I really enjoyed this. I read when this came up as one of our options to review, I went back and I read the first issue, and boy, am I glad I did. First thing right out of the gate, which I thought really impressed me, was when I literally just paged through the first issue and then the second, the benefits of having digital copies. Boy, do I love the art. The art is really, really good. And I mean, who doesn't? First of all, I'm a lover of history to begin with. And then who the hell doesn't? If you love history, you love knights and you love samurai. I mean, who doesn't? My God. And I just finished binge watching Shogun about a month ago. So, I mean, this is right up my alley. And this plays in a historical fantasy. I don't think knights ever fought samurai. And I'm sure somebody out there will correct me. Maybe they have, but regardless, it's just cool to see in a comic book. So literally, you had me at the title. You had me at knights versus samurai. And then the thing is, my expectations, I have to admit, were pretty high. And they were met because they were met artistically. And then I sat down and read the story, and Dalsmalchian, and that's a mouthful, but hell of a name. But David Dalsmalchian, he did a good job here. Basically, it's Sir Charles Ward is the knight, and he basically is traveling to he travels to the Eastern Seas as a follow up to see what happened to an earlier crew of knights, so to speak, that never returned, and then seeming, one lone survivor returned to Europe and said, "Oh, we, has some stories about being attacked and stories about, what happened, some tragedy." And so this second issue is the confrontation, the first confrontation that we're seeing between knights and the samurai, and there's hidden mysteries here. Not everything's revealed. It's wrong to assume. I think we as readers, we should not assume that the samurais are necessarily bad and that the knights are necessarily good. We're talking about colonial empires here. We got the knights from Europe, and then we got the samurai with their own agenda. You mix in with that a little bit of magic and fantasy on both sides of the between the knights and the samurai. And in this issue, you even have sort of like the epic, noble, honorable, standoff between the head of the samurais and Sir Charles Ward, the head knight, and ultimately Charles Ward is basically defeated, and then that sort of like takes us into that'll take us into the next issue. But the battle scenes here are gory. There's blood. There's violence. There's double page spread here. It's just like really good. You really get a sense that a lot's at stake. A lot is at stake. This is you see the pointlessness and the devastation and the gore of war, and this is. I'm not going to say this is Game of Thrones level politics, okay? This is issue 2, but I got to tell you that I'm intrigued enough that I know there's some magic here involved. There's some fantasy involved, and there's other agendas involved as well. And I also want to give a shout out to both the writer, but also the letterer, Underworld Design, because the samurai speak in what I'm assuming is Japanese, and so we get the both. So I got a heightened sense in the scenes where they showed the Japanese language and then below it the English translation. I got a heightened sense of the fact that these samurai knights didn't understand each other. So not only are they battling each other and they have a natural instinct to attack each other, but there's also that language barrier, which is significant. And I felt that, and you don't always feel that when you read these types of stories, because sometimes we have the conceit of knowing through the writing what both parties are thinking. And sometimes, it's nice to see that, well, yeah, guess what? They don't know how to communicate with each other. They don't speak each other's language. They only know they only know the language of war. And you get a sense of that as well. 2 issues in, and I'm really curious to see where this goes. And I give a high recommendation to this.
Yeah, I enjoyed it as well. I don't think quite as much as you, but yeah, I did very much appreciate that the Japanese was presented there. I'll have to ask David Dalsmalchian, I think that's how you say his last name, Dalsmalchian, about it this weekend. I'm going to a show at Revenge of in California. It's like a one-day show, like they call it a comic book block party. It's put on by Patton Oswalt and Jordan Bloom. It's a great turnout this year. A lot of big names are going to be there, and David's going to be there as well. So yeah, I'm definitely going to check this out. It has sort of a classic feel in terms of the Crusades and trying to spread Christianity and what have you, but also the sort of classic tropes of betrayal and greed and sort of power mongering, if you will, that was a part of a lot of royal houses back then. So yeah, it's very well done. You're right. The art is absolutely fantastic. Um, this Sir Ward Charles Sir Charles Ward,
Charles Ward, yeah.
yeah, is a fantastic character. He's marked by trauma, having lost his twin within the first, I think it's the first page of the first issue.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
I forgot about that. Yeah,
he loses his twin, so and he just wants to complete this mission and get back to his betrothed, so he can get married and live his life. But yeah, this idea that they can't communicate and they see each other as monsters, when really they probably have a lot more in common with each other as soldiers than they realize. And it's it's the ignorance and the arrogance of the leaders of these nations that are trying to impose their will and complete their holy mission and spread the word of God, or in the case of Christianity or what have you. I mean, again, like, not to say that we don't have problems these days, but and not to say that we still don't kill in the name of God, but it's not quite to the extent that it was back in those days. So yeah, fantastic story. Again, Knights versus Samurais, David Dasmalchian. Pretty sure that you'd be able to find the first issue if you look for it, because it has not sold out. So if your comic shop doesn't have it, they should be able to reorder it. If they don't have issue 2, they should be able to reorder that for you as well. So yeah, if you're into really great art and stories that are sort of based in history, then it's probably something that you want to check out. So okay, next up, so I do want to say that I'm not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure that this book came out this week, but some websites had it listed last week. Like, we got it sent to us last week, like it was coming out last week from Mad Cave, and it was going to be in comic shops last week, but I didn't see it in my comic shop, so I'm just not really sure. But it either came out last week or it's coming out this week. It should be available. It's called Hour of the Wolf. It's from Mad Cave. It's part of their Underworld universe that they're building. Let me get to the credits here if I can find them. Probably all the way at the end. But it's written by Mark London, or maybe we don't have credits. Just have to go off what's on the front. Yeah, Mark London. Daniel Bayrith is the artist. I think that must be Dave Sharp on letters. I'm not sure the Marquess handles colors, but I'm not 100% sure who that is. So anyway, I'm going to look up the credits right now while you give us your thoughts on it, Rocky.
Well, Hour of the Wolf is it essentially refers to the time between 3 and 4 a.m. in the morning. And the time between 3 and 4 a.m. in the morning is basically the hour where if you're killed by if you're killed by a fable or a creature of myth or legend, and you're killed between 3 and 4 in the morning, you become part of that story, part of that myth. And so the Hour of the Wolf is really about centered around essentially the wife and daughter of a man named Phil, who ends up being he ends up getting killed by a painting that was drawn by this Felix Dunning character, and this painting is called The Transactions, and he ends up getting essentially sucked into the painting, and he's given an ultimatum, and Phil is told by the inhabitants of the painting, give me, and the inhabitants of the painting are like two freaky looking kids and this other guy, and he says, give me your wife and your child or I will take you, and if you refuse, you get forever trapped in this big box and you live for eternity in a horrific state, and it's horrors await you. Well, it ends up that this poor Phil ends up essentially dying, and the central part of the story is that the mother and the daughter of Phil, basically, they're going to travel out to the cabin with the goal of just destroying the painting, because they always wanted to destroy it. It's brought them nothing but pain, and they want to destroy it. And anyways, they end up discovering that, or the story reveals that there is a hero that has been sort of um, living in the same hour since 1888, and is the way the story described it. And so uh, the hero doesn't really seem to have a name. I don't know. So he's on the cover he's on the cover of the comic, but and apparently he's someone who has survived being, sort of taken over by he's trapped in the painting, but he can he travels at different time eras, and whenever somebody is in danger between the hours of 3 and 4 in the morning of being killed by a fable or a myth and being trapped in that myth or fantasy, he can show up and potentially rescue them and prevent them. But he's got to get there, because if he doesn't rescue them by 3:59, so he's got an hour to rescue them, and if he doesn't rescue them by that particular time, they're forever trapped. And so that's the central conceit of the story. It's not overly complicated. It sounds like something that you'd maybe see, frankly, on a sort of like a B-level movie, but I mean that in a fun way, because I didn't really get a strong sense of horror from this. I thought this was like cool B-level fun, you know, and I'm kind of curious as to see who this heroic character who basically is going to be rescuing the mother and the child from suffering the same fate as their husband and father. And I'm curious to see what the history of this hero is. I could maybe guess. It has some degree of tropiness and predictability about it, I think. I could probably guess some of the plot points. But I thought it was a lot of fun. And quite frankly, it's Halloween. I mean, it's Halloween. So what the hell? I think this would be something to pick up. And I'm not sure if this is an ongoing series or just if this is going to be a 4-issue or 6-issue series, but I think it's worth picking up for this Halloween season. What about? Did you manage to check it out or read it at all?
Oh I read it. So we've had 3 issues solicited so far. As far as I know, it's an ongoing, because it is going to tie into like I said, the Underworld, which Revolution 9, and then can't remember the third title, but I which is terrible of me that I can't remember the third. Exit City, that's what the third title is. I interviewed Mark London, who's writing all 3 about Exit City at New York Comic Con. But yeah, so this idea of sort of almost like a supernatural, like, intelligence agency, if you will, or police force. Again, it's not the most original idea. BPRD, Bureau of Paranormal Research and Development, immediately comes to mind from kind of the Hellboy universe. But what's interesting and what's intriguing about this group is the fact that they only can operate between in the hour of the wolf, which is between the hour of 3 and 4 in the morning, which is just a really interesting concept. And so they have to travel around constantly. They're constantly traveling through time, and they're only allowed to exist in any given time between the hours of 3 and 4. And you see on this page that the main character, whose name is Owen Blackwood, is traveling through the time and trying to make sure the forces of evil, the supernatural forces of evil, are kept in check during that hour of the wolf, as it were. So, but what's interesting is when he goes to try to save the wife and child here, as Rocky alluded to, we saw the horrific scene when the father is pulled into the painting, and whoever this character is that's sitting in the chair. I mean, just such an impactful scene when he takes the straight razor and he like slits his mouth open, and then he slits his eyes open. I mean, just horrific looking. And so, in order to make sure that this wife and child don't end up suffering the same fate, Owen Blackwood goes there to try to save them, but he finds himself trapped in that same painting, right? And you get the sense that if he is part of this sort of supernatural police force, that he should know better, if you will, or he should be able to keep himself from being trapped. But what is this painting? Who is behind it? What are the forces of evil that he's trying to vanquish? And it very much feels like sort of a police procedural, if you will, with this Owen Blackwood playing, lead detective, sort of. So how it's all going to play out, we'll have to wait and see. It certainly feels like a concept that's really ripe with potential. can see it being an ongoing. But even beyond that, like I think of what we got with Revolution 9, where we're dealing with sort of um, secret cabals and clandestine organizations, of the real world, and that's going to tie in with this, which is a little more secretive. And Owen Blackwood, as far as we know, what we're told by him, that he only can exist between the hours in 3 and 4. He constantly has to travel through time. And then we have Exit City, which is going to be this futuristic thing. Like, how are all three of these going to tie in? Like, I'm very curious to see how that's going to happen. But the art by Danilo Bayrith is fantastic. The colors are by Fabi Marquez. Fabi is her first name, and they're really great as well, giving that sense of foreboding and darkness, and really helps it look very spooky. And yes, it is Dave Sharp on the letters. So I was really impressed with this. I kept time and time again, I kept going back to these 2 pages where this character, in the painting, pulls out the straight razor, opens his mouth, opens his eyes. I mean, just like it's cringy. It's cringy.
It is,
it's just fantastic. So yeah, I was really impressed with this. I'm all in for Underworld. It seems like it's going to be a really cool world that's going to be developed by Mark London and Mad Cave. They've already announced that there's going to be sort of a crossover event between the 3 books. Night of Terror or something with night, that's going to come next year. So we'll see how that all plays out. So, all right, now the last book that we're going to talk about, I didn't read it all. I did look at it. I was like, what is that? I'm not really sure. I very much got a 90s feel from it. And from what Rocky says, that's very much what it is. So anyway, it's called Blood Squad 7. It's written by Joe Casey, or the script is by Joe Casey. Paul Fry handles the art. Francesco Segala on colors. A color assist by Agnes Poza, and letters are by Russ Wooten. So give us your thoughts on Blood Squad 7 Strikefile, which definitely feels 90s in look and in name.
It does, yeah. It feels like you're reading an issue of. I have a lot of respect for Rob Liefeld. What I mean by that is I love Liefeld's passion for comics, but admittedly in the 90s I was not somebody who migrated toward Liefeld's comic books in the 90s. But I did pick up, I remember buying the first few issues of Youngblood, and they just weren't my cup of tea. But I have to tell you, you can't begrudge success, my God. And Youngblood was successful at the time. And, nowadays, a lot of the fans from the 90s, man, they love their old Image characters. And, that's this Blood Squad 7 is exactly that. It's got, I would say this is a combination of what you could almost think of as Youngblood with a modern day Suicide Squad. Think of DC, a cross between DC's Suicide Squad and Youngblood. And, where this really benefits is Joe Casey. Joe Casey is a skilled writer. This isn't his first merry-go-round. He knows how to weave a story. And now I'm not going to pretend I know exactly if this Blood Squad 7 existed in the 90s. I don't know, but you get the sense that it does, and it doesn't matter if it did anyway, because you can still enjoy the story. It's a new generation of Blood Squad. And there's an older character called Man of War who's existed since World War II. So you got a little bit maybe of a Captain America vibe. And this Man of War character, he's an older character. Think of an older Steve Rogers, where he's gone a little bit insane. And Blood Squad 7 has the new generation of Blood Squad 7, consisting of Night Striker, Ripcord, Infinity, Benoit, Alex Maxon, and Erica Richmond. They're the team that have been put together to bring him in, and that's really what it is. And I'll be honest, I really was expecting, because it had a 90s look, or an old 90s image look to it, I prejudged it. I got to admit, I looked at the cover and I thought, this probably isn't for me. I did admittedly only read this because I wanted to see what else, because I wanted to give it a fair shot. And I was pleasantly surprised. And I shouldn't be surprised because it's Joe Casey. And Joe Casey, actually, there's a story here. And it does have a Suicide Squad kind of feel to it. Not quite, I never got a sense that there's a hell of a lot of that much more at stake, but there's character work here. These are characters that care for each other. They've got a history. the battle, the art's done. The art by Paul Fry is really good. Francisco Segala on the colors, they really pop off the page. So the battle sequences are quite good. These characters care for each other, and there's also a lot of espionage. So there's hints of betrayal. That there's more at stake. So it hits. It's a well-paced story. However, I will say that I do feel like I've read stories like this before because I've read a lot. I love Suicide Squad, and it's got all the hallmarks of stories I've read before. But I just feel like it's its own story. It's just with different characters, and so. I think this is something that would be a really good comic for someone who, if you're not a fan of DC Suicide Squad, or not a fan of the big two in general, and you like Image characters, you like getting in, hitting the ground running, but with fresh new characters where maybe there's not a continuity. This is an easy story to catch on to. It's not rocket science. You don't need to read just because it references the 90s. That's all set up, and it's all explained very clearly. It's all a setup. Joe Casey's done a good job here of setting everything up for new readers. And hey, as much as I can poke fun at the 90s, I mean, I'd be lying if I said it doesn't put a smile on my face when I see covers like this. I mean, it puts a smile on my face. And it's the character, it's Man of War on the cover, and it got my attention, and I'm glad I read it. And if you're any fan of Image or Suicide Squad type action team-based stories, this is one. I'd recommend people check this out because I think it might end up being a pretty good team book.
Yeah, so it's an ongoing?
I don't actually know, to be honest with you. I don't, I wish I could tell. I mean, I did not read, okay, at the end of the letters page, it just says the next generation of evil has arrived and they've got a score to settle with the new Blood Squad 7. Find out what's going to happen next issue. So it doesn't say.
Yeah, it doesn't, and it doesn't have another, I just looked, it doesn't have another, an issue 2 solicited yet, so.
Well,
Yeah.
it says the 2024 schedule. It's on the back. It has to August 2024. Issue 4 was supposed to come out in August of 2024. Now, but this was only issue 1, so there must have been significant delays on this. I'm actually looking at the digital copy, so that's rather curious.
Yeah, interesting. So, all right, a few other independent books you might want to be on the lookout for that are out this week. Spawn is up to issue 358. That's amazing. What an accomplishment. Feral, issue 7. Tony Fleeks, Trish Forstner. Thundercats, which has been doing very, very well over at Dynamite, is up to issue number 9. Savage Sword of Conan has its 5th issue drop. Also in the Spawn universe, Spawn Kills Every Spawn, which is by Jonathan Lehman, and it's been just a really fun book. That's out this week as well. And then I want to mention Uncanny Valley from Boom Studios, which is also written by Tony Fleeks. That is out, and there is an anthology from Distillery called Come Find Me, an Autumnal Offering, which is a series or a collection of horror stories, but it's curated by Becky Cloonan, who's been winning Eisners left and right since she went over to Distillery. So clearly she's doing something right over there. Dune House Carino is up to issue number 7 as Dark Horse continues exploring that world. And I think that's it for what I was going to. I did want to mention Sectars from Oni Press, written by Dennis Culver, gets its first issue this week as well. So, all right. Well, there weren't a ton of books out this week, Rocky. So I don't know if that makes it easier or harder. But I think I know what your book of the week is. We'll see if I'm correct. But yeah, lay it on us.
Well, it's a tough one. Uh, I I think that at the end of the day, I'm gonna go with I enjoyed. Now I'm just a little bit of a cheat because I enjoyed the first issue quite a lot. I'm gonna go with Knights v Samurai because I'm a history buff, and at the end of the day, my love of history shines through. And I'm sort of combining issue one of Knights v Samurai with that, but I'll go with that. It was tough. I mean, I really loved. I really loved the Redcoat issue 7 with Einstein. I thought that was it was my favorite issue so far. Um, I guess I'm just spoiled by Jeff Johns because that as a single issue for Redcoat, that really was thought provoking. But boy, the Knights v Samurai just I makes me realize what I'm missing in my comic book reading is just maybe more uh, medieval comic books. But so I'll go with Knights v Samurai. What about yourself?
So I already had Redcoat queued up. I had it ready to go. I thought for sure that's what you were going to pick. That's why it took me a little longer to get the
Sorry, well,
no, it's
yeah.
fine. It's fine. I mean,
I led you astray because I do love Redcoat, but
yeah. So I thought you were going to pick Redcoat. I was happy you were going to pick Redcoat. Um, and then you threw me a curveball and picked Knights vs Samurai, which is still a great pick. Don't get me wrong. But that means that Redcoat ends up being the runner-up for both of us, because for me it was slightly edged out as well, and I got to go with Devour, which for all the reasons I said, really fantastic. I mean, just amazing. I mean, even things as simple as this cover, right? Like how this cover sort of resembles sort of a magazine, like a fitness magazine where you got the little articles, alongside the spine or what have you, but in this case it's the creator names. I don't know if you notice, everybody, if you're not watching this on YouTube, maybe you don't realize, but the Devour sign has a bite taken out of it where the title is. And yeah, just for all the reasons I said when I was reviewing it, how relatable it is, the multi-layered storytelling, just a fantastic first effort from Maytal, just fantastic. But let me tell you, this was close. This was as close as it could get, because I mean, I agree with Rocky. It's surprisingly so the best issue of Redcoat so far. Emotional, fantastic storytelling, and really heartfelt. So, but maybe it's because it's Halloween season. I'm gonna go with the horror book, Devour. But you can't go wrong picking up any Ghost Machine book these days. That's how I feel about their titles.
And I am wearing the Ghost Machine cap, so
yeah, definitely rocking.
That's my
which that reminds. So I have a Ghost Machine hat as well, and I think like 4 Ghost Machine T-shirts. And I also had a Ghost Machine beanie, and I lost it in New York. I don't know that I told you that. So I left my coat, I left my jacket, it's a light jacket. Because I live in Arizona, I don't really need coats, but I did have a light jacket, and I had my Ghost Machine beanie in the pocket, and I left it at the Marvel party. Called the next day, and long gone. And it had a Ghost Machine beanie in one pocket and my earbuds in the other. So nothing that wasn't replaceable, but it's a bit of a bummer.
Yeah. Well, some lucky person picked it up.
So yeah, I'm gonna have to order another Ghost Machine beanie and get another jacket. I already got more earbuds, so we're covered there. But anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Don't forget to check out the other content over on Rocky's channel, Comic Space Boom! Where our DC Spotlight comes out every week. Also, be sure you're tuning in to the Comic Source or listening to the audio-only feed, because there's a ton of content coming there as well. I've got an interview with Rafa Sandoval about Absolute Superman that's going to drop very, very soon. Now, Rafa doesn't really speak English very well, so it's a print interview, but that's going to be coming up. So check that out over on LRM Online. I've got the Mark Waid interview about Justice League Unlimited coming. I've got interviews with Global Comics coming as well. Amy Garcia. Just a ton of great content coming up. So be sure you're subscribed to the Comic Source on social media, YouTube. Do a search for the Comic Source and subscribe there as well. Just do a search for the Comic Source. Subscribe everywhere so you're sure not to miss any of our content. We have some fantastic books coming up, and we're really, really close to Absolute Superman, everybody. You're definitely going to want to be sure to join us over on Rocky's channel when we review that. And then we may do a page-by-page breakdown like we did with the DC All-In Special for Absolute Superman, because it's that good and it's that different of a version of Superman that I think it warrants that. But it's just a matter of finding the time. So look for that. And the last thing I'll mention, we've been really kind of banging the Ghost Machine drum because their books are so awesome. Going to be doing a deep dive, page-by-page reviews of some Ghost Machine titles. We'll go back to the very beginning with the first volume of Geiger. So if you're curious to learn more about Ghost Machine, look for those coming up on the Comic Source YouTube channel as well. So that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Any last thoughts, Rocky?
No. Happy Halloween to everyone this indie season, and pick up Devour. It's a great Halloween comic, and if you like blood and guts and gore and battles, Knights v Samurai.
Yeah, 100%. So, okay, that does it, everybody. Thanks for joining us as always, and we'll talk to you next time.
Catch you later.